My brother smirked across the formal dinner table, raising his glass as he looked directly at our parents. "Don't ask her about her career," he said loudly, ensuring every single guest in the room heard him. "It's far too embarrassing for a family like ours." I felt the blood rush to my face as the room went dead silent, my parents shifting uncomfortably in their seats. But his new girlfriend, sitting right next to him, didn't laugh. She just watched him quietly, her expression turning incredibly cold. Then, she slowly turned her eyes toward me, smiled warmly, and looked back at my brother. "So, Jason," she said softly, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. "Should I tell everyone here exactly who signed my executive paycheck this morning?" In a fraction of a second, my brother's smug grin vanished, and his face turned completely white. "My name is Sophie, and at 29 years old, I have always been the invisible daughter in my own family. While my parents and my older brother Jason spent their lives chasing a flawless, high society image, I preferred to stay grounded. I've always worn simple, practical clothes, and I drive a modest car because I care about utility, not showing off. But to my family, my lack of vanity was deeply disappointing. Jason, in particular, made it his personal mission to remind me where I stood. He had climbed into a mid-level management seat at a corporate tech company, and from his polished leather chair he looked down on my lifestyle with pure disgust. To him, my career was a dirty little secret that needed to be swept under the rug. He constantly belittled my embarrassing line of work, calling me nothing more than a glorified maid. You see, because I started out with a single bucket and a mop, my family assumed I was just a low-wage manual laborer working odd hours. They had absolutely no idea about the actual scale of my life. Over the last 7 years, that single mop had evolved into a massive commercial cleaning and facility management empire. I didn't just clean offices. My company secured multi-million-dollar contracts to maintain entire corporate skyscrapers. But I kept my mouth shut and let them think whatever they wanted, completely unaware that their desperate need to look superior was about to cost them everything. Jason never missed an opportunity to perform for an audience, and his upcoming promotion was the perfect stage. He had just been bumped up to a senior manager position at the tech conglomerate, and he immediately demanded a formal family dinner party to celebrate his brilliant corporate climb. To Jason, success wasn't real unless he could rub it in everyone's face. He spent days bragging to our parents about his executive perks, his stock options, and his newfound corporate authority. But this dinner wasn't just about his title. It was about his ultimate status symbol. He proudly announced he was bringing his new girlfriend, Clara. From what he told us, Clara was an elite corporate director, highly successful, incredibly sharp, and moving in circles Jason desperately wanted to belong to. He was terrified of looking unworthy in front of her. The night before the dinner, my phone buzzed. It was Jason. His voice lacked any sibling warmth, replaced entirely by a cold, commanding tone. "Sophie," he warned me, not even bothering with a greeting. "Clara is a high-profile corporate executive. She's used to dealing with people of a certain stature. When you show up tomorrow, do not talk about your dirty blue-collar job. Don't mention the cleaning, the hours, or anything related to it. It's far too humiliating, and I won't let you ruin my reputation or my future in front of her." I smiled quietly into the receiver, told him I wouldn't dream of embarrassing him, and hung up. The formal dining room smelled of expensive catering and desperate ambition. Jason arrived with Clara on his arm, and she was exactly as he had described: elegant, impeccably dressed, and carrying an aura of quiet authority. But as we sat down at the beautifully set table, I noticed something Jason completely missed. Clara's eyes were sharp, evaluating everything and everyone with tactical precision. As the first course was served, Jason completely dominated the room. He spent the first half of the evening dropping expensive brand names, discussing his new corporate parking spot, and making sure our parents knew exactly how much his designer watch cost. Our parents beamed with pride, hanging on to his every word like he was royalty. But Jason couldn't just lift himself up. He had to pull me down to make his pedestal look higher. He seamlessly began throwing passive-aggressive jabs at my lifestyle, mocking the simple cotton blouse I wore, and laughing about how some people just lacked the vision to climb the corporate ladder. "Some people are just content staying at the bottom of the food chain," he said with a smirk, glancing my way. I kept my expression perfectly calm, taking a slow sip of water. I didn't say a word to defend myself, choosing instead to watch Clara. While my parents nodded along to Jason's arrogance, Clara had grown increasingly quiet. Her polite smile had completely vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating look as she watched her boyfriend berate his own sister. Jason thought he was putting on a masterclass in success, totally oblivious to the fact that his toxic behavior was being thoroughly analyzed by the smartest person at the table. The main course had just been cleared when Jason decided it was time for his grand finale. He wanted to completely isolate me, ensuring Clara saw him as the only true success story in the family. He leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine glass with an arrogant smirk, and looked directly at our parents. "Don't ask her about her career," he said loudly, his voice echoing across the silent room. "It's too embarrassing. A family like ours shouldn't be associated with manual labor." My parents shifted uncomfortably, looking down at their plates in quiet, shameful agreement. Jason expected me to shrink, but before I could even blink, Clara intervened. Her fork clattered sharply against her porcelain plate, cutting through the heavy silence like a knife. She didn't laugh. She just watched him quietly, her expression turning incredibly cold. Then, she slowly turned her eyes toward me, smiled warmly, and looked back at my brother. "So, Jason," she said softly, her voice carrying a terrifying weight. "Should I tell them who signed my paycheck this morning?" Jason's smug grin vanished instantly. His eyes darted between Clara and me, his chest hitching as the room froze. "What are you talking about, honey? She's a cleaner," he stammered. Clara leaned forward, her gaze locking onto him. "Sophie isn't a cleaner, Jason. She is the founder and CEO of Apex Vanguard Group, my employer. Her company quietly acquired your entire tech firm last month, which means your sister doesn't just run a business. She owns the very building you sit in, and she ultimately controls your salary." In a fraction of a second, my brother's face turned completely white. The silence in the room was suffocating. Jason tried to let out a forced, nervous laugh, his eyes twitching as he looked around the table. "Clara, come on, that's a good joke," he stammered, sweating through his expensive designer shirt. "There's no way Sophie is a CEO. She drives a 10-year-old sedan." Clara didn't flinch. She opened her leather portfolio, pulled out a document, and laid it flat on the mahogany table. "It's no joke, Jason. This is the official corporate restructuring charter signed 3 days ago. Your sister's enterprise holds a 70% controlling stake in our conglomerate." She then turned her sharp gaze directly toward our parents. "While you've been boasting about Jason's middle management promotion, you completely ignored the fact that Sophie built a multi-million-dollar commercial empire entirely from scratch. And honestly, Jason, you should stop talking about wealth altogether. I've seen your corporate file. You're currently drowning in over $80,000 of credit card debt, just trying to maintain the illusion of a high society lifestyle to impress me." My parents' expressions instantly switched from embarrassment to utter, paralyzing shock. My mother dropped her wine glass, the liquid pooling onto the white tablecloth as she stared at me like I was a total stranger. My father's mouth opened slightly, his eyes darting from Clara's official documents to my simple blouse. The daughter they had dismissed as a failure for nearly a decade was suddenly revealed to be the financial titan of the family, while their golden boy was exposed as an absolute fraud. The illusion had shattered, and the fragile house of cards Jason had built completely crumbled before the dinner could even finish. Disgusted by his deep-rooted insecurity, his toxic arrogance, and the blatant cruelty he had shown his own sister, Clara didn't even wait for coffee. She stood up, looked down at Jason with absolute disdain, and told him they were finished. She walked out of the house, leaving him sitting alone in the ruins of his own making. With his relationship dead and his massive debts exposed to our parents, panic fully set in. But his biggest fear wasn't his social standing, it was his job. He finally realized that the sister he had spent years humiliating was the ultimate authority over his entire career. The next morning, the arrogance was entirely gone. A completely humbled, desperate Jason showed up at my private office, cornering me before my executive assistant could stop him. The smug manager who had ordered me to stay silent was now trembling, his face pale as he practically begged me for mercy. He pleaded with me to help him save face in front of the board, terrified that Clara or the corporate restructuring team would terminate his contract. He wept, apologizing for every cruel word he had ever said, trying to use our childhood bond to protect his position. I sat behind my desk, watching him spin in circles, realizing that the bully had finally run out of ground to stand on. I looked at my brother, realizing that true success never needs to bark, brag, or tear others down to prove its worth. I didn't fire Jason. I let him keep his job, knowing that walking into my building every single day and working under my shadow was a far greater lesson than any pink slip could ever teach him. Today, my company continues to thrive, securing larger contracts than ever before, and I still live my life with the same quiet humility I've always valued. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have fired him on the spot, or would you have let him stay to learn his lesson? Comment your thoughts below, and let me know which city you are watching from so I can see how far Sophie's story has reached. Meanwhile, I am leaving 2 other incredible stories on the final screen right now. They are absolute channel favorites, and their twists will definitely surprise you. Thank you so much for watching until the very end, and I will see you in the next story.